All right, so let's look at handout 17F, which I believe is our last handout of the chapter. I never did get around to making handouts for the ear, so we're going to be using PowerPoints for that. So this is our last handout, 17F, and it's going to go through the physiology of vision and talk about how we take an object that we're looking at and how that object moves through our eye, and then how we have that focused correctly onto the retina where it can turn into an action potential. So if you look at this, I have a little example where I have a triangle. Let's imagine we're looking at this blue triangle. Now all of the structures of the eye are going to be refracting the light and bending the light so that it can land on the surface of the retina, so that the retina can take that information and turn it into an action potential. So if you look at this, the first structure that the light passes through is going to be our cornea. So the cornea, that transparent sclera, is going to refract the light and angle it towards the pupil. Now, in between the cornea and the pupil, though, is that aqueous humor, that watery fluid that lies underneath the cornea. Now, that watery liquid is also going to bend the light and help that light move through the eyeball. Now, with the aqueous humor, we're moving that light through the aqueous humor through the pupil. This watery liquid is constantly being generated, and then it's constantly being broken down. And if we add too much of that aqueous humor fluid into this anterior chamber of the eye, that is a disease called glaucoma. So glaucoma is having too much aqueous humor within that anterior chamber. Kind of interesting. Okay, so the light goes from through the cornea, through the aqueous humor, through the pupil, the donut hole of our iris, and it hits the lens. The lens is then going to continue to refract that light into the posterior chamber, and containing inside that posterior chamber is that jelly-like stuff called the vitreous humor. The vitreous humor is a clear jelly-like substance that continues to refract that light towards the retina. Now, here's another disorder. That transparent jelly can sometimes crystallize. So you get these little crystallizations within the vitreous humor, and those crystallizations are called floaters. So if you have a floater in your vision, I have a lot of floaters in my vision. For some reason, I guess nearsighted people have more floaters than farsighted people. But when I look around, I've got these little, they look like particles floating in my vision. Those are called floaters. And for the most part, they are harmless. They're just sort of annoying as they float around in your vision. But this jelly keeps them suspended. So they literally float around, and if you hold your eyes still, gravity will allow them to sink kind of down throughout your vision. But that is contained in the vitreous humor. Now, the image is going to be displayed on the back of the retina. Now notice how the image is upside down. So my triangle, when it hits the retina, because of all this light refraction through the eyeball, the image is actually upside down. This is how a camera works too. An old-time camera, not the digital cameras, but an old 35 millimeter camera, when you took a picture with that and the image was displayed on the film, it was actually upside down. No one knows that because you just took the film out and then had it developed and they turn it over and it's right side up. But in the camera, it's displayed upside down. The retina is going to contain these special sensory receptors called photoreceptors. These photoreceptors are made out of two different types of cells, rods and cones. Rods are going to be working for us to have black and white vision. Cones are going to be displaying color vision. So I just wrote here that the rods and cones turn light into action potentials that then can move down the optic nerve to our brain. We're going to talk a little bit more about this in the PowerPoint slides coming up. So rods display black and white vision, cones display color vision. Now, to focus, the lens has to focus the light onto the retina. In order to do that, remember we go back to the suspensory ligaments and the ciliary body. So the ciliary body is going to pull on the suspensory ligaments, which then changes the shape of our lens to focus the image onto the retina. This is called accommodation. So the lens is accommodating. It's changing its shape based on what it needs to do to focus that light properly onto the retina. All right. So that process is called accommodation. Now, to give you an idea about what accommodation is, imagine that my hand here is the lens. All right. So this is the lens. And when the suspensory ligaments pull on the lens, we change the shape of the lens. So when those suspensory ligaments and the ciliary body muscles are relaxed, the lens is a very round shape like this. And then as those suspensory ligaments pull on the lens, it flattens the lens out like this. Now, when we want to see up close, our suspensory ligaments are going to relax and the lens becomes very round. That allows us to see up close. When we want to see far away, like let's say you need to look outside the window and look across the street, to focus that light, the suspensory ligaments are going to pull on the lens and make it more flat. This change in the lens shape is called accommodation. All right. So when we are looking up close, our lens is nice and round. When we're looking far away, the ciliary muscles pull those suspensory ligaments and make that lens more flat. Accommodation, as we get older, can become an issue. That lens, as we get older, our lens becomes less and less and less elastic. And so what it doesn't want to do is relax and become very round. So this right here, where our lens is round, it may not be able to make that shape or to take that shape. And that's when someone would need to get reading glasses. They can't see up close as well. That's because this lens is not as elastic as it used to be. And so it's not forming this correct shape to focus the light onto our retina. This disorder is called presbyopia. And this is when you might need reading glasses. When accommodation is affected, the change in shape of the lens, when that is affected, usually by the lens losing its elasticity, that is a disorder called presbyopia. And with presbyopia, we need reading glasses. Okay, so that takes care of our final handout. For the rest of the chapter, we're going to be just using our PowerPoint and talking a little bit more about vision and then get into hearing.